don't get old.
Yeah.
It all hit me when I turned 65, 70, 60, 75. That's when it hits. And I'm like, no, that's not when it's supposed to hit. That's when that many decades of putting inappropriate foods, especially in our current world with seed oils, processed food, grains, sugars, that's eventually what happens in our bodies. It starts to break down. That stuff is inflammatory, it's toxic. And knowing the half-life of all of those seed oils being like 680 days, I think is the estimate of the half-life of that. That's an awful long time to get that stuff out of your body, even after you stop eating it. So think what it's doing, all these years in embedding in our cells, and it affects every organ system.
Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chaffee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Plant-Free MD podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Lisa Wiedeman, who is an ophthalmologist and a long-term carnivore. Dr. Wiedeman, thank you so much for having me, or for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. I am just really passionate to help get the word out. I've been an eye doctor for over 33 years, but that's really not my claim to fame in this all, because I found zero carb carnivore over 15 years ago and jumped in because I had disordered eating. I had a tendency to, now that I look back and realize I was addicted to sugar and carbs. So it has changed my life. And now I see the benefit, not only for my patients with their eyes, but people with depression and anxiety, and just life-changing, So I like to be a representative of the fact that this is sustainable. It's very much sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. So you came to this 15 years ago. How did you even come across it at the time? Because it was it was little known. It wasn't like a big movement or anything at the time.
No, yeah, it was very small. It was actually really even before the big keto movement, but
Mm,
there was a low carb kind of side to it. And of course, Atkins had been around and out for quite a while, but I would realize that if I stopped eating sugar and flour, it had a very positive impact. But I realized I could also binge on fruit or, other things that didn't fall into that category. But I so diligently persevered in my search to try to relieve my plate of not understanding why I was so driven to eat and overeat, and feel really compelled to just I didn't understand it, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't stop. So, like I said, diligence, persistence, I came across on just a internet web surfing
mm,
kind of evening, and a group called Zeroing In on Health that Charles Washington had. They branched off of a low carb group that kicked them off, this thread of people who were doing zero carb and finding just incredible benefits, and thinking to themselves, well, why do we have to stop? And according to Atkins, you climb the carb ladder, at some point, and they're like, why do we have to climb that ladder? And let's look into this. And they were a great group of people that were talking about different resources, like books like Fat of the Land, Not by Bread Alone, the Vilmar Stephenson writings, Owsley the Bear Stanley, who had been eating this way for, I think, like 40 years at the time. And yeah, it was just, one of those points where I said, wow, that this was meant to be. My path crossed with this group, and there was no looking back. I just decided to jump in. I thought it was crazy.
mm.
I thought, oh my gosh, how is this really possible to just eat meat and drink water. And I was like, well, there was a couple women in there that I'm grateful for who were very open about their eating disorders, and they were talking about how it has resolved that. And I said, I'm all in, and I'm going to research it along the way. I will be N equals one experiment trying to figure this all out. But in the meantime, I'm going to jump in and do it. And I just felt better and better. And I really realized that this truly was the optimal way to nourish ourselves. And I thought, well, not only is this helping me, but it's actually healthy. And there was no turning back at that point that I would ever touch this toxic stuff that I was literally addicted to. And I think it's important for people to realize that I think we're on a spectrum, and there's some, just like alcohol, you can drink socially, or you can be a one or two glasses a night, or you can not be able to stop until you black out, right? I think there's a similar spectrum with people with their outright addiction to food. It is a very real thing. And we hear it all the time. People are like, oh, I started carnivore. I did great for 6 months, and then I fell in the ditch. I call it the carb ditch. And now I'm having a terrible time getting back out. And yeah, so that's what really brought me into this. And I found this little tiny group that was a forum online, and so grateful.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I really like zeroing in on health. When I first sort of came to this as well, like, I don't know, 6.5 years ago now. Again, I did this sort of independently in my early 20s, randomly, but I just wasn't going to eat plants. And so that was my sort of, zero carb, because I was zero plants, and that sort of came with it. But when I came back to it and was doing this intentionally, that was one of the first ones I found too, was zeroing in on health. And I really liked them a lot more than some of the other ones, because they were very strict, and they were saying, look, this is the way we think that works the best, this is what we found that works best for the most people. And I liked that. I liked the no nonsense sort of approach, saying, hey, look, this is what we think is optimal. And so this is what we want to talk about. And if you guys want to do something different, go ahead. But just, this is what we're talking about. Don't confuse people. Don't, put things in here that are going to screw people up. And it's a lot easier to do that when you have other places that you talk about things, and there's like, oh, well, this is all the bro science comes out, and it's just like, so everyone has like 50,000 different opinions. And so no one knows what the hell to do. So if someone new coming in there, they don't know what to do, and they're just like 30 people all speaking authoritatively. And it can be very, very confusing for people. So that's where that and zero carb health are the two that I direct people towards the most, just for that reason as well. Were you
I
pretty?
think, I think what's so difficult now
Mhm,
that it is so widely more known, right,
mhm,
is that now all of a sudden there's a huge amount of conflicting information,
mhm,
and people get confused and they start saying, oh, I'm not doing it right. How do I do it right? How much fat? What about the macros? And there's so much noise around so many different things that I think it scares people.
mhm,
It kind of hinders them from jumping in. And this, I said, you know what? This is really simple.
mhm,
Make it simple, and don't overthink things, and don't chase numbers, and don't worry about ketones right now. Just think about, as animals plopped on Earth, what would we be doing? We would be hunting animals and eating
yeah,
fatty meat and drinking water,
mhm,
because we would not be have access to coffee and tea and alcohol and artificial sweeteners. And I know that's a whole other hot mess of discussion about the right and wrong way and different things like that. But yeah, those resources, zero carb health with Dana Spencer's group is great, because it really, like you said, kind of gives real straightforward, no nonsense. This is realistic. And then people say, well, what about metabolic flexibility and carb cycling and on and on and on?
mhm.
It it's hard though. It really is.
Yeah. Well, there, yeah, and people can make very good arguments, right? The whole idea of, well, women need carbohydrates during different times of their cycle, and this gives more hormonal support, and give all these like really, really great sounding reasons for that. And then people, sounds good. Okay, well, yeah, of course, our woman's body's going to work different than a man's, and obviously we're going to have different demands, and so they make that argument. They're very good sounding arguments, and then it's just like, okay, name one animal on Earth that does that. Name one female animal that eats differently than male animals. Name one female animal that eats differently around estrus than outside of it. They may eat more, but they eat more of the same thing. Mammals drink their mother's milk and they get weaned onto their mother's diet, and then they eat that diet for the rest of their lives, boys and girls. There's no difference. And why would we be the only being on Earth that worked differently? That never made sense to me.
Well, and the same thing when people come at me with, well, what do you think about that blood type diet? Like people
Oh,
with different
wow.
blood types. I'm like,
Yeah.
do you really think people out in their primitive tribes were pulling blood, deciding what blood type they were, and then heading for the vegetables versus the meat versus I just think that's crazy,
Mm.
to even ponder that possibility.
Yeah. And how would like just the one or two protein differences on the surface of your red blood cell fundamentally change your entire digestive tract and nutrient requirements? It's just like, well, if you're type A, then you should be vegan. Okay, apparently you don't need B12 now if you're blood type A. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm blood type A, and I'm pretty sure B12 is a good idea for me. And my mom's blood type O, so I guess that's different. There's just different species. Mom's a carnivore, my dad's an herbivore, and that sort of doesn't work, right? Like I've always put this challenge out there, and the one person who got closest still wasn't correct, but I've always challenged, like, name one species anywhere on Earth where you can find two members of the same species that have different optimal diets. And one person came back with orcas, which is fairly good. And there's a certain kind of orca that is a bit smaller, different sort of communications. They don't, you know, interact in the same way, but they mostly eat fish. And there's another kind of orca that's bigger, and they mostly eat, marine mammals. And but they've actually been classified as different species. And one of the criteria for that was actually because they have pretty diverse diets. Now they're both carnivores. They both eat meat, but they sort of different preferences on the type of meat that they eat. Um, and so, they said that and other differences, they communicate differently. They don't really interact. They don't interbreed. They don't do anything like that. They probably could interbreed, but they don't. They choose not to. And so they're saying for all these reasons, and one of the reasons was they have a pretty different diet, preferred diet. These are different species, so it's a different species, right? And so that was the closest that they got. But either way, still both carnivores. You're not going to find, like a lion that does better on zucchini than gazelle. You're just not going to. You can test every single lion on Earth. It doesn't matter their blood type or anything else. They're gonna eat do best on meat. And just because Native Americans were eating bison and people in Ireland were eating sheep, that doesn't make the Irish a different species to Native Americans. It just means those were the animals that they had access to. That doesn't mean that they can't eat each other's animals, and they often do. It just means that those were the animals around. And so the orcas sort of specialize their hunting for different prey. It doesn't mean that they're doing all have different requirements for nutrients. It just means that's their sort of preferred hunting prey.
Yeah, and the one thing too that is often, I'll just say, thrown at me, because
Mhm.
over the years of being in this space, you become targeted for
Mhm.
these comments, but they will say, well, everybody's different,
Yeah.
and I'm glad that works for you, but everybody's different. I tried it, and I, whatever, had this and had that. And I said, well, first of all, trying it, did you Did you give it enough time that you've gotten past adaptation phase of it? Because there is a little bit of when we go from standard, what I call SAD, not standard American diet, I call it the standard atrocious diet, or we could call it the standard Australian diet to get that letter A in there. But when you go from that and head toward what you and I believe is the ancestrally appropriate diet for us, then there is a period of time. So, but yeah, just that comment that everybody's different.
Mhm.
So just like we're talking about, like there's squirrels out there. Are some of them heading to get something else? Like I don't understand that concept that everybody's different.
Yeah.
It's we're all humans and we have the same digestive tract, we have the same teeth, we we have the same, makeup. People will say, well, genetically people are different. Yeah. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, to what extent, I mean, it's like the differences are pretty minute, I mean, yes, we have genetic differences, but so do lions, so do sheep, so do all these other animals that are still of the same species. We are not actually that distinct. Like we see the differences in each other visually. And of course, we have, some idiosyncrasies, but overall, we are the same species. And we're not even the same species, we're the same subspecies. We're Homo sapiens sapiens. Like we are very, very closely related. And it's we have our differences, and of course we do, and that's great. Have that diversity. We can adapt and change and to different sorts of environments. But that doesn't mean that we fundamentally change what nutrients we require. That doesn't mean that we fundamentally change which enzymes we all of a sudden someone had, from Asia can make cellulase out of nowhere. So it's like, no, this is like the fundamental differences are very minute. Fundamentally, we are the same species. We have the vast, vast, vast majority of our DNA and genetics are the same. And we have the same requirements nutritionally by and large. We have similar capacities to detoxify certain things and inabilities. The vast majority of plants will kill us. Some plants people do better than others, but Native Americans, Native Australians, they're much more sensitive than people from Europe and the Middle East and Northern Africa and other places that have had agriculture for longer, because that 10,000 years of adaptation, yes, that gave our ancestors more exposure, and so we have different adaptations that make us able to better weather and detoxify those toxins a little better. But that doesn't mean that they're good for us and now we're herbivores. It just means that we have a bit more protection because of our sort of recent genetic past. But for the past 2 million, 3 million years, no, it was like the last 10,000 years when the megafauna died out. That's when these changes started. And you see these things that came out there. They found like one group of humans like between 10 and 15,000 years ago, and what's now Madagascar, and they ate a lot of plants. They ate meat too, but they ate a lot of plants. And they were like, oh, okay, look at this, prehistoric man ate a lot of plants. I was like, well, all the areas that went to agriculture, like they presumably had to move to agriculture because they weren't getting the meat that they needed. They weren't hunting. And so they started doing more hunter gathering, and then they realized, hey, you can put this seed in the ground and it grows, and they started doing that. So there had to be a transition. You don't just go from an apex predator to then just like growing crops of corn. There's a thousands of years of sort of merging into that and learning about plants and using them and things like that. But also 12 15,000 years ago, that's after the megafauna died out, right? So what about before that? Before that, we're eating meat, because we had meat available. It's only when it stopped being as available that we had to sort of switch to other means. But during the ice ages, when there's megafauna, what else is there to eat besides meat? Not much. And so the vast majority of our time genetically and the vast majority of our adaptation has been in the direction of eating and thriving on meat. Hey everyone, really happy to announce a new sponsor for the show and for everybody down in Australia. It's Stockman Steaks, who are delivering high quality grass fed and finished pasture raised beef and other meats, flash frozen and vacuum sealed to your door, something that I've been enjoying a lot of myself recently as well. They also have a great range of specialty items such as high fat keto mince and carnivore beef and organs mince with liver, kidneys, and beef heart as well. So use code Chaffee today for a free order of beef mince or another specialty gift along with your order at stockmansteaks.com.au, and I'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we're not omnivores. We have the capacity and capability
Mhm.
to digest other, foods, but what is ideal, and is that more for survival in times where maybe we weren't upon a herd of animals? But certainly, if there was a plate of ribeye in front of a hungry person and a plate of kale and spinach and tomatoes, what are we thinking would be eaten?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the dog, every like vegan dog owner tortures their dog by putting on vegan salads and things like that, which is just horrible to do to a dog. And then they like come on some morning talk show sort of thing, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll put some meat and some veggies out there, and dogs instantly just goes and just starts nailing the meat, and it's like, oh, thank God, it's actual food. They've just been starved for nutrients this whole time. And that's the thing, the dogs, wolves, I mean, they're carnivores. I mean, can they survive on some plants? Yeah, sure. But that doesn't mean that that's best for them. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. Like you're saying, it's survival. Like, can we survive on things? Yes, and that's given us a survival advantage. And we've been able to weather a lot of storms and famines and be able to eat things to make it through. But it's not,
But
that doesn't mean
but
that
what
that's
is
the best for us.
optimal?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Cats can get up to 60% of their calories from carbs, but they're not they're not omnivores. We don't even call them that. Even though they could eat plants, we call them carnivores. So I think obligate carnivores. And I think although we are able to eat a lot more plants than dogs and cats, we still do require meat, and there's nothing in plants that we require. So it's really just a survival. It's just nice that we can do that. But what we need is meat, and that's what's optimal, and that's the whole sort of point, really, is being as healthy as we can.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult to convince somebody who has a whole different mindset regarding what is healthy. And then, of course, you could get into the ethics about it. And I have people who approach me of, I don't eat dead flesh. How do you possibly think that's natural and normal? And I said, go out and look at, there's a fox right outside my place here who will have
Yeah.
a rabbit in its mouth. And there's, like, look at the circle of life. Look
Mhm.
at the way, this whole thing evolves. And why would you think that you need to, forage to grab some carrots and potatoes, and that's appropriate?
Yeah, it's like watching National Geographic video sometime. It's just, how can you say that's natural? Because it's literally nature, and it's literally our nature. And 70% of animals by species are carnivore. That's another one too. There's more and more data coming out that plants are actually way more intelligent than we think. And there was one paper that came out recently that alleged that plants are actually more intelligent than humans in a lot of respects, and that they're absolutely sentient and even more intelligent than humans. They can actually see you. They can see you. They can tell what color shirt you're wearing. Apparently, I don't know how they figured that one out, but they did. They don't have eyes, but they have like proteins and photoreceptors all over their body and leaves that we would have like on the back of our retina. And so they don't have eyes. They are eyes, and they can just see everything around them. And they have a nervous system. They don't have a central nervous system. They are a nervous system, so they don't have a brain. They are a brain, and they respond and think, feel, react to pain. They scream. They send out signals. They can actually communicate through their root system and pass nutrients and water throughout entire forest systems. Like you have generally a sentinel tree in the middle that actually runs the whole operation. and we'll coordinate. It's like, okay, well, these guys over here are in a drought, so we need to pull water from 3 miles over here and sort of move it underground through the root system, and they actually get them the water and nutrients they need. It's absolutely incredible what they can do. And 100 years ago, people didn't think that it was a problem to torture animals and be cruel to them, because it was like, well, they don't feel pain like we do. It's not the same thing. And of course that's ridiculous, but we didn't know that at the time. People didn't accept that at the time. And now people think that, oh, just plants are inanimate objects. It's just like breaking a rock. It's not that big of a deal. And now we know, no, that's actually not the case. They think and react to pain, and can be very they respond to damage and react to it, and they send signals down and react, and make more toxins and scream and say and signals and warn at all the other plants around them. So that's pain. That's what a pain signal is. So that's our pain signal. You have something happens here, signal goes up to our brain, and then a response comes down. Pull your hand away. You know, and plants do the exact same thing. So the idea that they're just being these wonderful, wonderful people and so moral and ethical by slaughtering plants by the billion, and
Well, but let's add to that the whole true knowledge that when they are doing the crops and
mhm,
preparing fields, how many animals, rabbits, fox, squirrels, snakes are
deer,
being
yeah,
slaughtered
yeah,
um, in the preparation of the soil and the crop. And yeah, that seems pretty crazy that that's not ever brought up by them. It's just about that cow that I ate off of for 6 months or however long, right? But not all the animals that were obliterated to provide the spinach and the soy and the corn for, the the vegetable eaters.
yeah, yeah. No, it's true. And there was a study out of University of New South Wales. They found that when your parents are eating like large animals like sheep and cow, you have to kill 25 times the number of sentient animals, not just bugs, but sentient animals, to grow 1 kilo of plant-based protein versus animal-based protein. That's not even taking into account the low bioavailability of plant-based protein, and all the anti-nutrients that, tannins and protease inhibitors that are going to block out the absorption of that protein. So if you're getting like actual bioavailable, this gets in your body and is usable, it's going to be way more than 25 sentient animals per kilo. So it's something that gets ignored. I had this conversation with a couple of vegans, Tash Peterson, who's is a vegan activist. We did a debate with her and I believe her boyfriend. I can't recall his name at the moment, but and then I made this out to them, and they literally just honestly had just never heard that before, and they just thought it couldn't possibly be. They're like, no, I just don't think you realize that that's just not the case. I'm like, no, this actually is. Like, I don't think you realize just how many animals get destroyed by growing crops. 55% of Borneo's rainforest has been bulldozed to grow palm seed oil, and it killed all the orangutans and snakes and birds and animals all throughout that jungle, just mass slaughtered an entire ecosystem just to now grow palm seed oil crops. And then, the animals that move in and try to, live in that habitat, as if it were a habitat, get killed because now they're disrupting the crop. So they have to go through and just shoot the orangutans and all these sorts of things that are trying to, or other sort of animals that are trying to eat the crop. I don't know if the orangutans bother with the crops, but anything moving in there, disrupting the crops, they get done, and they really just don't even recognize that.
Yeah, I try to just stay in my lane
Mm,
and answer to those plant-based questions, but uh, it's hard to really go against somebody like myself who has just changed my entire life and improved
mm,
it in so many ways and have witnessed so many others. There's just,
mm,
I have an open mind. I do. I listen and learn, and I still come back to it's incredible the testimonies that are hear about being able to really heal ourselves with this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, to that point, what are some of the things you saw? Have you incorporated this into your practice as an ophthalmologist as well?
Absolutely. I have really changed because I'm all about root cause healing,
Mm,
and it's really important that I that I practice this way because I can't any other way now. Now, knowing what I know, I have healed people's dry eyes, some severe blepharitis and meibomian gland dysfunction, uveitis. It has really empowered me and inspired me to be able to practice in a whole new, different way. So it's been just very gratifying, except it unfortunately it takes a lot of time.
mm,
And the practice I worked for was not so into me going against the standard of care protocol of prescribing the drugs and moving on to the next patient. So it's very interesting how this has really evolved. And I will forever be able to practice this way instead of the way I used to. And it's just very, very empowering.
yeah, well, that's great. I've actually seen a number of people online talk about how, and actually a couple of people that I've known say that their prescription for their eyeglasses actually ends up becoming too strong. They actually have to reduce their prescription, and some people actually not needing glasses anymore. Have you come across that as well? I would imagine you of anybody should know.
Yes, absolutely. I have two different videos where, because it became so apparent that people were healing so many things and coming to me reporting it between glaucoma and floaters and dry eye and their prescription lessening, that I was like, I can't hold this information in. There's so many people that want to know, can this help my cataracts? Can this help? Can this help? And I go back to the whole thought now of saying, this is really a point where I feel our bodies will heal, and taking away any sort of toxins is going to really be able to allow our bodies to get to that state. And it's not going to pinpoint any organ system over another. It's not going to ignore your eyes. If it's healing your skin, it's healing your diabetes, it's healing your joint pain, it's healing your depression and anxiety, it's going to heal your eyes too. It's going to heal. And so, yeah, absolutely. I'm fortunate because of being an eye doctor, that people now who have come to Carnivore for other reasons, it's great that they are now able to just get in touch with me and say, you know what, I did it for this reason, but guess what's happening? Because
Mhm.
people always say, well, will it do this? Will it do that? I'm like, I have not been able to, as an eye doctor, having a patient in the chair who has, let's just say, the early starts of something, to tell them to go in and do their entire redo, clear out their pantry, clear out their refrigerator, and do this, what I call fly your freak flag way of eating. That's not very common to be able to do. But the fact that I can get reports, testimonies, anecdotal stories from so many people who have turned to this for other reasons, I can say emphatically, yes, it's
Mhm.
really powerful in how it will heal.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, do you know like what sort of certain types of nearsighted or farsighted issues that can heal on this, or is it sort of random?
Yeah, so I'm, I have people say, well, I'm a minus 14
Mhm.
uh, myope. Will this heal? And I have said, you know what? You're not going to go from a minus 14 to not needing glasses. Well, I can't say, but I have not heard that yet.
Mhm.
So the interesting thing is that it it there's so many people that have had improvements, and the real question is, how much of an improvement and over what period of time. So I can't really give an answer, but some people say their astigmatism got better, their nearsighted, their farsightedness. But for the most part, I'm going to say, let's just say it's mostly diseased states such as macular degeneration can halt or reverse, things like that, dry eye, chalazion, hordeolum, meibomian gland dysfunction, all these things for sure have improved, but I'm not going to guarantee everybody's going to get rid of their glasses.
I've certainly seen people keep their glasses, and others reduce them and not need them. So I was always wondering, I wondered if it was a certain kind of vision loss that might be reversible. I think that'd be interesting if it was like a specific type that we found out at one point. But either way, just the fact that it's happening for a lot of people at all is pretty amazing. So that's fun.
Definitely.
Yeah. So one of the things too, you mentioned, Owsley, who goes by the bear, and he was a carnivore for like 50 years, and then he died in a car accident, and he was like the sound engineer for like the Grateful Dead for a long time, and so he had this really sort of cool background in life. But do you know much about him and how he started on a carnivore diet himself? Do you know his little origin story at all?
I'm not really sure exactly what the start of it was for him. But there is available a free PDF that's out there, and I do have it listed in my membership group. I'll send you the link if anybody's interested. It's a fairly long document, but it's really interesting. It's his views and his, basically carnivore journey. So, because I know he was not, he did not believe in eating salt, which became a topic back in the zeroing in on health days, and sort of an interesting topic now, because we do talk about how, is it necessary? There's plenty of sodium in meat, and there's a lot of long-term carnivores that don't salt their food, and that's a whole different topic. But it's just interesting that he was one that we talked with or talked about, and just getting his experience was pretty valuable.
Yeah. That was a bit of a gold mine. I think it was just sort of random that he sort of came into this and saw everyone and say, "Hey, by the way, I've been doing this for 50 years, and I happen to know a lot about it." That was pretty amazing. It's a shame that he's not still around. Like, now that the movement has sort of expanded to the point that it has, that would have been great to have him around. But it's great that people like yourself and others who you were there from the early stage and like got the benefit of his experience are still around too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really valuable, the readings that he wrote. He was actually very active in a low carb group, and then he got tired of repetitive questions and all that. I had to move because I have contractors here. I thought, this is not going to be good having them in the background. So because what else do we have to go by other than each other's experiences at this point? I mean, we're all humans living in what we were born into, a society that bread and pasta and rice and cookies and ice cream and pizza is the norm, right? And so to buck the system and what I call fly our freak flag, because, this is very uncommon, very unusual, and it's very hard for people to comprehend that this actually could be the ideal way to eat. And what I say, everybody else who are eating the freaky way, we're eating normal, optimal, ancestral food, real whole food. And when I say basically meat, seafood, eggs, and water is pretty much, that gets down to the gist of what I feel optimally is what we should be nourishing our bodies with. And everybody else around us eating nachos and, you name it, and don't eat anything that comes in a box, a bag, a bottle, or a jar. That's freaky. Why are we
Mhm.
eating? Why are we putting in our body things that a company made, taking your money to eat their processed food? And to be able to, fall back on somebody like Owsley and there's a couple others. I don't know if you're aware of Joe and Charlene Anderson. They've
Mhm.
long-term carnivores also. It's so important because, like I said, we're, and then we look at the photos of people back in the 1900, 1910. They'll have different um uh, old videos of people walking down the street, and they were all slender. And,
Mhm.
there's not the obesity that we have. And what's gone wrong? Really, what has gone wrong in our in what we're putting in our mouth? And we
Yeah.
all have at every moment, we have the ability to decide what's going to lead us to health or what's going to lead us to harm. And it is so yeah, I keep saying to people who are naysayers, I say, just give it a try, see how
Mhm.
you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I always suggest that as well because I know how they're going to feel. They're going to feel amazing. Some people take a bit longer, but the vast majority of people feel um, infinitely better within a few weeks to a month. And and they just see for themselves. I like how you say that about us eating naturally and them eating weird. It's totally true. It's just that the they're not eating normally. It's just the norm. That's just the common way that people are eating now. But that doesn't mean that that's the normal way for humans to eat. And this is reflective in the fact that we're all sick and overweight and not able to function normally. We're getting this massive, massive increase in burden of disease, and we're just thinking, oh well, that's just normal. We just didn't notice it before. Like,
That's what happens when you get old. I would have
yeah,
so many
exactly.
patients sit there and just say,
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys.
oh, don't get old.
Yeah.
It all hit me when I turned whatever they'll either say 65, 70, 60, 75. That's when it hits. And I'm like, no, that's not when it's supposed to hit. That's
Mhm.
when that many decades of putting inappropriate foods, especially in our current world with seed oils, processed food, grains, sugars, that's eventually what happens in our bodies. It starts to break down. That stuff is inflammatory, it's toxic. And knowing the half-life of all of those seed oils being like 680 days, I think is
Mhm.
the estimate of the half-life of that. That's an awful long time to get that stuff out of your body, even after you stop eating it. So
Yeah.
think what it's doing, all these years embedding in our cells, and it affects every organ system.
Yeah. And yeah, and the thought that what's normal is eating something out of a bag that was created in a factory, that's normal is a bit wild as well. And that's the thing. Yeah, I think we do need to think of these things in different ways. We need to frame these things in different ways. It's like, no, hold on a second. I'm eating real food. You're the one eating crap out of a bag. Like this is actual whole food. That's what we're supposed to be eating. What animal eats crap out of a bag? That's not in a,
And
in a
then
slave pen somewhere.
absolutely. And then the thing that really gets to me, this one really really riles me up, is when people say, yeah, I can see what you're thinking and what you're doing, but I haven't seen the studies. And how would you possibly risk your health and your heart when there's really no studies? I'm like, really? Where's the study that your Pop-Tart and
Mm,
pizza were healthy? Where's the 20,
mhm,
30-year long-term study on that? Are you waiting for that to come out? Like, why are you're so incessant that you have to see the study? Where's the study of all the crap you're putting in your body is healthy? Like,
mhm.
I don't see the study on that.
Yeah, yeah, very good point. And the thing is that we've been eating meat forever. That's established. We know that that's good. You have to prove that eating alternatively is better, and no one's done that. And no one's ever proven that meat or fat is actually bad for you. There's some associative studies we now know are fraudulent, and that's it. And so, like, where's the what's the problem with eating meat? Like there was no evidence against eating meat. There was no real evidence. There was accusation and propaganda. There's no actual evidence, and that they've been thoroughly debunked. And so we don't need long prospective, randomized controlled trials. You don't need that. That's what we've been doing.
And
That's
we
the
already have
norm.
hundreds of thousands of years.
That's it. That's
But
it.
then it's when you get the people that are really diligent on trying to make their point, they'll say, yeah, but the the life of man was so they you died
Mm,
so young, and the lifespan was 35 years and all that. And I was like, that's a crazy statistic too, because
mm,
how many women in newborns died in childbirth, that
mm,
skews that. And yeah, and then I get to the point and I tell people, I go, you know, well, people who come to me and say, yeah, what do you say when people are saying all this? And I said, first of all, you have to remember that you don't owe anybody an explanation and don't feel obligated to have to defend yourself. Just know that what you're doing has caused you to feel good and get healthier. And that's all you need to know. And
mhm,
if you're going to question whether you're eventually going to die of a heart attack because your cholesterol is a little bit higher, guess what? I want a little bit higher cholesterol. I think that's normal. Our brains are full of cholesterol. Every cell in our body needs cholesterol. Why are we believing the propaganda of statin companies that cholesterol has to be low? The lower the cholesterol is, the higher your death rate.
mhm,
Why are we trying to lower cholesterol, and why are we incessant that you feel great in so many ways. You start eating this way and so many things are getting better, but you think your body's going to attack your heart and
mhm.
cause disease there because of eating this way? Like, where's the logic in that?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and your body's making something that's damaging your body and killing you from the inside, and then that's natural. I mean, you would have been bred out a long time ago. You wouldn't have made it.
I say we'd have been extinct.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
that was the case, we would be extinct right now.
Long time ago. Yeah. And that's the thing too. And they say that, like, oh, well, people only lived like to be like, in their 30s, like 35. It's like, really? Were you there? Did you take census data? Like, was there a census bureau 50,000 years ago? Like, what the hell? Where are you getting that? Where are you getting that people only live 35 years? That's a completely made up number. I mean, and then you're right, like people dying in childbirth, but also infant mortality is very high in primitive cultures. And even in 1800s America, the infant mortality rate was extraordinarily high. I mean, until we got potable water, it was a big, big problem in America. Now, around the world, in third countries, dysentery this is a major killer of babies. And so, this is something that once you get potable water and you do that, then the infant mortality comes up, and then the overall life expectancy comes up on average from birth. But the people that carry out these statistics, even from the 1850s in America, were way more intelligent than the people making that statement, because they did it from birth and then every decade of life after that. For every decade of from 1850 to like 2015 or 17 or something like that was the last sort of chunk that I looked at. I have the link on my phone. And so the average life expectancy from birth in 1850 in America was like 38 years. So it's like, oh, the people just died in their 30s. Like, okay, really? That's average from birth. If you made it to 10, you made it to 56 on average. And you made it to 20, it was longer, and it just went up like that. And so when you got to adulthood, especially, 30 years old or longer, you generally lived as long as people do now. And so you compare that to, people alive now, 30-year-olds now, on average, they live to this, very similar to how long a 30-year-old would live in the 1850s. And a very simple test on this, and, just, I mean, the whole idea, oh, everyone died at 35, before the 20th century or in the 1800s or in the caveman era. Okay, that doesn't even pass the smell test, because like what's the minimum age for people to apply for running for president in America? It's 35. That's the minimum. And that was a rule that they came up with in 1776, or around, after the revolution. So in the late 1700s, they came up with that. And Ben Franklin was 64 at the time of the American Revolution, and it wasn't like, oh my God, it's Methuselah, he's the oldest man on earth, it was just he was just a guy, and all the founding fathers, they all died in their 80s or 90s, being born in the mid 1700s. So, the idea that we just died in our 30s is just complete and utter fiction. If you look back to the histories, the different populations where they talk about life expectancy and how long people were living, it's a very different story. I mean, you look at um, um, Alexander the Great of Macedonia, like he was in his 20s when he died, but he died of something, and but his soldiers, if you read the different histories, and I read one from Dr. Victor Davis Hanson at Stanford, and very interesting. And he was saying that Alexander's troops, um, were the foot soldiers, were anywhere between in their 20s to in their 60s. And they conquered the known world. And they carried 14-foot long steel spears with 5-foot long blades and a big weight at the back to off balance it. And they just, trudge around killing people. They had like a 50-to-1 kill rate. They absolutely just destroyed these other armies in their 60s. And one of Alexander the Great's generals, who they were lead from the front generals there. They didn't sit back in a tent somewhere. Oh yeah, yeah, go do your thing, and watching from a hillside. They were leading the cavalry charges. So one of his generals that led one of his wings of cavalry was in his late 70s, leading cavalry charges in his late 70s. So really, people died in their 30s. Really, they just decayed and died, and their bodies just couldn't handle it anymore. The earliest histories that we have from Herodotus chronicle an interaction between the Persians and the Ethiopians, and the Ethiopians were talking to the Persians, and they said, okay, what do you people eat? How long do your people normally live? And they described growing wheat and making bread, and they said, well, our people normally live 70 years. So, I mean, it's in the Bible, people talking about people living that long, not 30 years, like living 70 years or longer. And the guy that came from Ethiopia just sort of laughed at him and said, well, no wonder you live such short lives if all you eat is dirt. We only eat the boiled meat of our cattle and boiled meat, and we only drink the milk of our cattle besides water. And our people would live 120 years, sometimes much longer. And people think, wow, they're just making that up. But now we know, as geneticists, you're designed to live 120 years based on the length of our telomeres. And so if he was just bragging, it was a very interesting number that he just happened to lie about. And that number comes up in a lot of other native populations, like the Native Americans in the 1800s, saying that they were living around 115, 20, 130 years. And so, the idea that everyone was just dying in their 30s is complete and utter fiction. Even if it were average from birth, it would be average life expectancy and infant mortality. But the fact of the matter is like no one is ever going to be able to know how long people were living in the ice ages, because there's just no data on it. We don't have census records. We don't even know what the infant mortality rate is. It could be high. It could have been lower than it is today. We're never going to know that answer. But just people just making that up and saying, "Oh, but we were only living 30 years." Says who?
Yeah,
Where's
and then
the evidence for that?
talk about making things up, then we might as well just add in a little ditty here
Mm.
about that whole blue zone thing,
Mm.
and how, manipulated data, cherry picked to push a plant propaganda that
Mhm.
people, so many people are buying into. Oh, the blue zone, and then I think the statistic is Hong Kong has like the longevity winner, and they have the highest meat consumption, and
Mhm.
people really try to debunk that. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Yeah. And why isn't that a blue zone? They have the highest life expectancy documented on Earth. I saw something from Dan Buettner, that con artist that made up the blue zones and then sold it to the Seventh-day Adventist Church for something like $68 million.
Wow.
And yeah, and so he he was saying, people were saying, well, no, people in Okinawa, they actually eat a lot of meat. Well, now they do when McDonald's has come in, and now they're not a blue zone anymore because they started eating meat. Like, no, first of all, McDonald's, the vast majority of food from McDonald's is not meat. And so if you're eating meat, if you're eating McDonald's, you're not eating meat, and that's what's making you sick, idiot. And second of all, no, I spoke to a lot of people from Okinawa who are from there, and their grandparents are the people that are, in their late 90s or over 100 and very healthy and living active lives. And they all say they eat like, 80+% of their food comes from meat, and they eat a lot of, pork and things like that, and and fish, and the majority of what they eat is meat. And then, in Sardinia, um, Professor Bill Schindler went to Sardinia, went to the epicenter of the first blue zone ever identified, spoke to the same people that were spoken to in the blue zone. I won't even call it a study, the zone propaganda, that and said, oh, these guys, they only eat meat once a week, and they're so healthy, they're just all vegetarians. And they even said, like, why does everybody think we're vegetarians? Where the hell did that come from? Like, and they even said, they were like, and they're the ones, they were talking about them, and they were like, this is what, why are people saying that? We're not vegetarians. And they were eating tons of meat. And then one day they came up to Bill, and he said, hey, we're going to eat meat tomorrow. It's going to be great. And he's like, well, what do you mean we're going to eat meat tomorrow? We've eaten more meat here than I eat at home. And because everything was meat, they had just platters of meat. They had charcuterie plates, they had cheese boards, everyone had pigs in their yard. They all made their own dairy. They all had meat around. And they had some plants too. They had some olives and tomatoes, and homemade wine and things like that. But they were very active. They're very strong community value and structure. But the vast majority of the food that they ate was meat. And then one day a week, they had meat, which was, they're like, no, 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 no. What we do is we take a whole sheep and we put it on a spit, and we just have like an all day barbecue. And we all just like hang out for 8 hours, just eating tons of meat and chilling out and relaxing. And so that's eating meat once a week, apparently, to Dan Buettner. And that's what the lie that he passed on. And he's trying to, cover his tracks. People are, calling him out on this. Um, but and then the other thing he's saying is like, well, yeah, well, now these people are eating more meat. Now they're not blue zones anymore because they're eating meat. And it's just like, well, no, first of all, McDonald's isn't meat, so that doesn't count. And also, a lot of it was pension fraud, wasn't it? Like, they found that a lot of these people were lying about their age so that they could qualify for pensions early because they were poor, and they wanted some help with the rent. And then other people that were already on pensions and they passed away, they just buried them quietly and didn't tell the government and just kept collecting a check. So it was rampant voter or pension fraud. And and so, now he's saying, well, yeah, Okinawa actually has a lower life expectancy than the rest of Japan. And it's because they're eating more meat now. And it's just like, shut up. Like, the old people would still be alive if that were the
So
case.
crazy. I know, because what it comes down to,
Mhm.
and hearing what you're saying about how what I just call manipulated data, it's
Mhm.
like, how can anybody believe any study anymore
Mhm.
anyway? Because who's it funded by? Who's behind what agenda they're trying to push? And the money that pours into it's so costly to do these studies. They're definitely going to get the answer they want promoted with these studies, and they will maybe do 13 studies and throw 12 of them out, and the one study of the 13 that showed a glimmer of what they were trying to
Mhm.
say by whatever they have to manipulate it to get it to say that these scientists are getting paid you know, by by somebody who's looking for a certain answer. And so I don't know. I think it really comes down to being, and how can we be skeptical of every single scientific study? Well, you can, you can when you start understanding what is actually going on with these studies and supposed science.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that'll be interesting. But they're making such a big push for this whole plant-based thing. And coming, from your work as a doctor and seeing this in yourself and in your patients. I mean, can you think of any good reason why they'd be doing this, or is it just purely due to push a narrative and sell a product?
Well, we don't want to really get so deep in the political doo-doo here in the
Mhm.
discussion, but I do think there is a global agenda to weaken the population, and how you do that is with
Mhm.
with plants. And
Mhm.
the elite are going to eat the meat, and they want the masses to eat the mush. And
Yeah.
why do you think they're starting, big on this Beyond Meat, plant-based burger stuff, and putting insects, crickets, and whatever into foods? I mean, this is
Mhm.
all ridiculous. And to think for a second that there isn't, um, what do we really think is there the push is in regarding that they 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 really think that there's something with this carbon emissions. I mean, that's all a bunch of phooey too. So like I said, maybe we shouldn't get so political here
Yeah.
with my opinions on a lot of this stuff, but we have to really think long and hard about um, what the message is. And in my experience, the best thing to do is the opposite. They tell you to slather on sunscreen and fear the sun because of, skin cancer and I think the opposite. We need sun in our eyes.
Mhm.
We need sun on our skin. We need to not put chemical sunscreens on our skin. And so therein lies, do the opposite. Our eyes have so many receptors. Our eyes are directly connected to our brains, and they're not there just for vision. There's so many receptors that are signaling to the brain the time of day for circadian rhythm. There's so much more that's involved in just than vision. So I try to really promote to people that the importance of spending time outside, and get outside early in the day. And then during the day, try to spend at least an hour, because, we've all become, uh, I think the statistic is we spend 93% of the day indoors. And I think
Mhm.
part of something that we should really think about doing so much more of is just getting outside.
Yeah, I think that the big part of it, just trying, eat ancestrally and just sort of live ancestrally to as much as we can in our current society. But everybody I talk to that sort of gets back to nature, goes camping, goes out in the woods, they always feel so much better for having done that. And some I know some people that one guy I had on my podcast actually, he was working at a very high paying job, but he was just sick. He was all sick all the time. And just one day he, just went out and he would go out and go camping a lot with his dad as a kid. And so he said, okay, I'm just going to go out. I just need some time off. And like for 6 weeks, and he just felt like a new person at the end of it. Felt so much better. It was just hunting and fishing and out in the wilderness, and felt a lot better. Then he came back and was feeling worse as he was in work. And then he sort of did like 3 months out, on like a sort of a safari, out in the bush in Africa, just as sort of, okay, I'm going to test this and see what this is like. And it just really helped his health. He said, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm quitting. And he just went out and just started living in the bush. And so now he's just out, just living in the bush in Australia, and barefoot, white guy, living in like a
Off the
stick hut.
grid, right? What we call off the
Completely.
grid.
Yeah, that's it. Completely off the grid. He hunts, and like he does like endurance hunting. Like he chases down animals, and he'll chase them. He said after they can't sweat like we do, so they get overheated very quick. And so after about a kilometer, they just lay down and they just give up. They're like, okay, that's it. right, I'm done. That's it. And so, sometimes he'll hunt them. Sometimes he just does it for um, practice, just to see that he can. He just sort of tags them and lets them go. And but other times he does hunt, and that's how he eats. And now he's sort of gone carnivore because of that, because he's just like, that's what you got to eat when you're living out in the bush. And he's just completely reversed all of his health issues. And there's a lot to be said for that. I try to get out in the sun as much as possible. I'm exactly in that statistic. The 98% of my day is going to be inside, and I try to like linger in the sun, like walking out to my car, maybe just stand on the lawn for a bit and get some sun on my face and in my eyes,
Exactly.
when I can. And then I gotta go to work, and then I'm stuck indoors all day. And it's a pain. But the hope is one day to just to be able to be outside more often than inside. And I do definitely believe that in its health benefits as well.
Yeah, it's everything, I try to wear barefoot shoes and I go barefoot as much as I can. I think
Mhm.
it's healthier for our feet. I think it's
Mm.
healthier for our posture and our gait. And the whole thing with grounding, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there's a whole different aspect of this, what I just call the carnivore lifestyle, instead of just the thought of, yeah, I'm going to eat meat and drink
Mhm.
water. There's a whole host of health issues to think about living ancestrally.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so what are some of the groups that you run now? Is that are you just trying to help people just get onto carnivore, or what do you focus on mainly?
You know, I've come to realize that a bit of my niche in this carnivore space has come from my horrible 30-year suffering of carb and sugar addiction and disordered eating. And I have an amazing group where it's support. It's talking about um, the necessity for abstinence in people like us. And I feel that it's so important to have community and support. I mean, as animals, we want to feel like that we belong and that we're in a group, and to feel so isolated, uh, for the majority who turn to this way of eating, discovering it and doing it, it becomes socially isolating a bit. Family, friends, coworkers start to roll their eyes, and it becomes really an amazing support to have a group that you can come to and talk with. So
Mhm.
in my group, I go live about 5 to 6 days a week. And it's discussions and it's all sorts of different topics. And um, I say, so community is the opposite of addiction, and addictions love isolation. And if anybody knows the plight that I'm talking about, it's back in the days when you're caught up in it, is as waiting till you're alone to eat, getting in the car and driving and eating and hiding the wrappers. It's all these bizarre behaviors that seem so ridiculous to maybe somebody who hasn't suffered this, but um, it's a reality. And so I always said, if I can help one person out of the misery that I lived in, then I'll be a success. And
Mhm.
I'm so happy to be able to host. And I'm right now sitting in a beachfront, oceanfront condo I purchased next door to mine, that I've
Mhm.
renovated and created a carnivore beach retreat. And I'm hosting this
Nice.
summer 5 day, I don't want to call it boot camp, because this is all about just coming together and being with others who um, are living this lifestyle. And yeah, so there's going to be cooking demos and walks on the beach early in the morning. And I'm just really thrilled just to keep going forward with the message. And I've also been sort of um, donned the queen of meetups, because
Mhm.
I have hosted at this point, I think 30 meetups where I just, wherever I travel, I announce either it's going to be a lunch or a dinner at a pretty much all you can eat meat um, type of restaurant. And it's, they're so empowering. It's so magical to be there and be with people who get it. And so that became also my mission because as I walked away from each of them, I said, there is something really, really special about this. So especially every year I host a big one in New Jersey. Last year it sold out at 125 people. I have a regenerative rancher up in Rhode Island who comes down and with a chef. And yeah, it's just um, my message and my motivation is all to just have everybody get as healthy as they can and realize that you have the power to change your situation by what you decide to put or not put into your mouth.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's fantastic. Dr. Wiedeman, thank you so much for coming on. That was absolutely excellent. And I still want to make it to one of your meetups, and I'm sure I will at one point. But where can people find you and find your groups and find more of your work?
Yeah, so I'll give you the link. I'm on Mighty Network and it's called Carb Sober Freedom Community.
Mhm.
And my website, carnivore-doctor.com. There's links for that and information about the Carnivore Beach Retreats is also, I can give the link for that. And if you put it in the show notes, that would be great because
Yeah.
it's like I said, I'm so excited because this summer is the first of them and it's going to be life-changing for people. I am personalizing a small group each retreat and I just am so excited that people will be able to experience my life here on the beach. They're going to come to the gym with me because, I know, also how important it is to keep muscular strength up and how simple it actually is with just a couple times a week. So, yeah, it's being immersed in this lifestyle, which I think is going to be just so great for so many people who actually have an open mind to give it a try.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll put all that in the show notes and people can take a look there to find out more. Dr. Wiedeman, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Dr. Chaffee. It's been so great being here, and I'm definitely looking forward to you attending one of the meetups soon. And I will see you in Wyoming too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so for people that are interested in that, that's the Rendezvous City Beef Roundup in Riverton, Wyoming in what's it, August 24th or that weekend anyway. And so we're going to be there along with Dr. Sean O'Mara and Jake from Life Like Jake and Courtney Luna, as well as Simon Lewis, who do How to Carnivore with. So we'll have like a good carnivore cohort there. And they're actually changing their town motto to the most carnivore friendly city on earth, which is kind of fun. So they're really, really leaning into the whole carnivore movement, which is great. And it's a beautiful part of the country. It's absolutely stunning. We spent like 4 days out in the Tetons and Yellowstone, which was actually I've been wanting to do that for decades. I absolutely loved it there.
Beautiful country, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. Well, looking forward to seeing you there. And anybody else who's coming, we'll see you all there as well. Take care. Hey guys, thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to what I had to say. If you like it, then please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and podcast. And if you're on YouTube, then please hit that little bell and subscribe, and that'll let you know anytime I have a new video out, which should be every week, if not more. And if you could share this with your friends, that would help me get the word out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Thanks again, guys.